Whether it's growing a business, a rugby club, or a charity, the one thing they all have in common is that it takes time to make it a success and is often dependent on partnering with the right stakeholders and sponsors. One of the most prolific organisations currently in the sport is Premiership Rugby, and the Rugby Business Network has the immense privilege of speaking with its CEO, Mark McCafferty. Mark, thank you for providing us with the opportunity.
That's a pleasure.
Well, Mark, before we talk about Premiership Rugby, I have to mention that you spent the early part of your career with Midlands Bank, and then for 11 years after that, you were with Cook Group, and you even joined Avis before going on to pursue some private investments. How would you describe your journey in business leading up to becoming CEO of Premiership Rugby, and what were some of the highlight moments for you?
Well, I guess the way you describe it, I'd have to say it was probably unconventional. I think the thing that knits it together, if I look for some logic in there, is a couple of fronts, really. It was all great preparation for focusing on customers. And I think also I was fortunate enough through that career path to have a very early exposure to the world, to very many different markets around the world. And I think that gave me a pretty global view early on in my career, and I hope I've been able to deploy that in a lot of situations since then. And whether it's a customer having a wonderful holiday that they've earned through all the hard work they've done, and we were able to arrange that and give them a fantastic experience at Thomas Cook, or whether it was 82,000 fans enjoying last year's epic final between Exeter and Wasps, then they're both, in a sense, a culmination of a lot of work that goes in by the organisation and the team that I'm fortunate enough to be part of.
Well, speaking of the team that you are now a part of, in 2005 you were appointed Chief Executive of Premiership Rugby. What attracted you to the position, and what is it about the business side of sport that interests you the most?
I think on both fronts, really, it was the sheer potential, first and foremost, of the sport. Because I still think that, rugby is, it's probably more than scratching the surface now of its potential. But I think as a sport, whether you're participating or watching, it's still got bags of potential. And, even back in 2005, I felt that I could see that. And I think we've probably realised some of that, but still only a small part of that potential. So, that remains today as big an attraction as it did back then, really. And the business side, it's always a challenge in sport because people's immediate attention is drawn to the performance side, really, rather than to the business side of it. In other words, how's the team doing? Has it won? Has it performed? And so that's the initial kind of pool of people. But in order for that to continue and grow, all the things off the pitch have got to be in good shape as well. And I think, that's the bit that some of us have to spend a bit more time trying to take care of and ensure. That is about having, attention to detail, great partnerships, and people who want to invest in the sport.
Most definitely. Well, Mark, you are now 12 years into the job. You've got some experience, more than some experience behind you. Could you give our listeners some insight into the running of Premiership Rugby? What are some of the common challenges that you are faced with, and how do you make sure that the organisation continues to grow and reach the new targets you set out year after year?
I mean, like a number of organisations, we set ourselves some clear objectives, but around that we have a clearly articulated set of values. And we spend a lot of time talking in the business and in the team about how to bring those values to life. One of those values is being professionally excellent. And I think that's the kind of platform, in our view, to how we try to do business. We think we get it right most of the time. We certainly don't get it right all of the time. But if you've got a base of excellence in the way that you deal with partners, the way that you prepare for situations, the way that you react to situations, those types of things, then that gives you a really good platform. And then what we try and do on top of that is kind of add the personal touch. How do we take care of those relationships? How do we interface with key individuals? How do we communicate? So a platform of professional excellence, and then try and layer on top of that a personal touch, because I think I think many businesses, but certainly in sport, that's something that people are attracted to.
That personal touch is always so important. Well, one of the most important sides to rugby organisations, obviously not just the Premiership, Mark, it's to have some good stakeholders on board. How do you go about building those relationships with investors? Do they come to you, or is it a matter of you approaching them?
Well, both. If it's direct investors into the clubs, obviously they have shareholders today. We haven't had a huge amount of turnover in those shareholders, but we've had one or two changes in situations. So, often we'll get involved from Premiership Rugby partway through that process of change to explain to investors how we approach things, what our strategy is, where we're trying to take the competition, what the role of the individual clubs in that is, what we do for them as clubs. So we play a part in that, but probably a bigger part really, and on a more regular basis, play with commercial partners, media companies, sponsors, government, community partners. And that's where we try, as I say, to try and apply those values which are described, which is how do we demonstrate to those partners that we are excellent in everything we do? How do we make sure that they have a real sense that they are dealing with a top-notch organisation, in not in scale necessarily, but in the way that we prepare ourselves and the way that we execute things and the way we follow up on things. And I think one of the things in sport is often the commercial partners that sport attracts are a multiple in size of the sport itself. So you're dealing with some really blue chip names who expect high standards, and that's why I say the sort of entry point, the base non-negotiable for us as an organisation is to try to ensure that in those relationships we have very high standards ourselves, and if we've achieved those, that's when we're in position then to add more of a personal touch as well. But you can't do the latter if the former platform isn't in place.
Absolutely. Well, to follow up on that, Mark, having sustainable sponsorship is obviously what any organisation would welcome and tries to nurture. However, is that a realistic objective, or does every sponsor have a natural lifespan in rugby? And is it at all possible, actually, to guarantee that businesses continue to invest in the game?
I'm not sure there's a natural lifespan. I think every sponsor is different, obviously. I think the things we focus on is why are they attracted to the sport in the first place? Well, we're trying all the time to raise the popularity of our competition and raise the popularity of the sport. We try and take care of those sponsors as best we can during the lifetime of our relationship, even when circumstances change for them, and they can do. And so we've had some really good long-standing relationships with the likes of Aviva, Land Rover come to mind, particularly, who've been involved with us for many, many years. So I think you need to keep refreshing those. Like any relationship, you need to keep refreshing it, injecting new ideas and energy into those situations, and prolong that relationship for as long as possible. Particularly in the current environment where it's challenging. There's a lot of change going on. Taking care of the people who have been with you for a long time is probably the number one priority.
Couldn't agree more. And in your opinion, and based on your many years of experience at Premiership Rugby, what should business leaders with a passion for the sport be doing to justify having a sustained investment back into the rugby community?
From their perspective, I think some of the key stories are growth. Most people want to partner with things which are developing and growing, and I think there's no doubt whatsoever that the sport of rugby is growing. When you look at the kind of scale of the Rugby World Cup now, the interest that was driven by the Lions tours, the growth of the competitions beneath that, the growth in the women's game, it's all really good stuff and really good messages. And I think for any business whose leadership is looking to associate themselves, that element of growth and inclusion is an important one, an increasingly important one in today's world. So I think that's probably a big factor. I think we continually find that businesses are attracted by the values of the sport. As it develops and as it becomes more and more professional, we have to work very hard. There's something we're doing here to try and protect the values of the sport. But for partners looking to be involved, that's one of the things that we constantly hear they're most attracted to. The fact that a referee in a top-level, big stakes high crunch game can pull two captains to one side and said, look, go talk to your players. I'm not happy with this. You need to sort it out. If you don't sort it out, I will sort it out. That kind of thing, or the players leaving the pitch through a tunnel where, even in today's professional age, they'll wait for the team to come off the pitch. They'll go find their opposite number, shake his hand, and then applaud him off the pitch. Those are things which we've got to work very hard to protect, because those are the things that people love about our sport, and things which companies who are perhaps new to the sport are initially surprised by, but very attracted by. So those are probably some of the things, the growth, the values, and then the attachment still to the community. All of our teams, certainly here, have big community programs. We have a big central community program. The players spend a lot of time with young kids, getting involved in the game. That attachment to the local community, irrespective of how big the competition becomes or how big the clubs become or how well known the players become, that attachment to the community is still fundamental in what attracts people to our sport.
That is so true. Well, Premiership Rugby has many investors, but what can businesses, larger and even small, do to help the organisation and its players further?
Get involved. As a company, whether you're small at the moment or whether you're more established and bigger, there are many different entry points into the sport, as you say, whether it's support for the players, for the coaches, whether it's involvement with your local club, the businesses that are already engaged with that club, and the opportunity for you to network with those businesses and become involved and do that in an environment which is entertaining, safe, secure, and brilliant sort of match atmosphere. So, it's nice to do business in an environment where people love the product. Sometimes business can be pretty hard and you go through difficult times, but doing that in a sporting environment where you've got a love for the product and the output of it is always makes life a little bit easier.
Well, there are so many avenues to get involved with. It's absolutely wonderful. Well, Mark, HITZ is the organization's award-winning education and employability program, which works with over 2,000 teenagers across England every single year. Tell us a bit more about this program, and how could our members at the Rugby Business Network provide their assistance?
It's a brilliant program. I mean, it's been going for 8 years now. It started in 3 boroughs in the City of London, and it's now a national program. And, we partner with the likes of Land Rover and Comic Relief and Wooden Spoon to drive the program forward. These are youngsters who have started with very little, if anything, and are now on a journey that can take them through to fulfill their potential. All of our clubs are involved in that. We go into some difficult areas where kids have had very difficult backgrounds and difficult starts in life, difficult environment, and using the power of rugby, we build programs which not only give them an opportunity to enter sort of alternative education or qualifications, but prepare them for either employment or further training and give them confidence through the sport of rugby. We've now seen over 12,000 youngsters go through that program over the last 8 years, and it just goes from strength to strength. If you're not already involved, then get involved, because it's truly inspiring.
Yeah, sounds like an absolutely spectacular program that you have there. Well, you also have had some involvement with the Rugby Business Network in the past. Why do you believe it's important for these types of organizations to exist in the rugby community?
Because it brings people together, and I think, on a purely personal level, I think communities are important, and communities are not just about individuals. Sometimes they're about organizations, and I think the ability to learn from each other and the ability to engage with each other is all part of the way we work, and I think that this type of a network is just a forum all the time for people to spark off each other and learn. And if you're open to that, you can pick up an enormous amount. Everybody progresses more quickly if they've got help, whether you're a big organization or a small, and we're certainly one of those. If we can get the right sort of help with the right sort of partners, then hopefully we can go quicker towards our destination. So I think that's why the Rugby Business Network brings together people who have got a common interest, but then it allows them to leverage off each other to achieve their goals faster than they might otherwise have done. So I think it's brilliant when those platforms can exist. And as usual in life, you get as much out as you put in. So a lot of it is get involved and make the most of it.
Getting involved, absolutely. Love that. Well, being the CEO of such a large and well-established organization, I'm sure it comes with a few of its stressful moments, Mark. What do you do to just, take a step back, take a break from it all? Do you have any particular hobbies or interests away from rugby?
I still play a reasonable amount of sport, less so team sport these days because of the time commitments, but still play golf and tennis, get down to the gym pretty regularly, try and keep in shape because it's a pretty demanding year-round environment, and staying sort of physically in reasonably good shape is an important part of being sharp, I think, mentally. So my children are now in their 20s, so they're a little bit less demanding, at least time-wise, maybe not financially. But so that gives myself and my wife, more time to do some of those things. But I think for everyone, it is important to try and get away and safeguard some time for yourself and for your family, because one of the things I think I've learned in sport is really a 24-hour industry, and you have to be expected to be called upon within reason at strange hours of the day, strange times of the weekend, strange times of the year. I think we all in sport tend to suffer from the same question from friends and people we meet of, during the off season. Well, can't be much you're doing now, given that it's in the off season, and I guess it's the same as teachers being asked whether they do anything during the summer holidays. But that's why we're involved, because it is relentless and demanding, but it's also thoroughly enjoyable.
Well, it's great to hear that you are still keeping active, even with such a demanding lifestyle, because physical strength equals mental strength, most definitely. Well, finally, Mark, what would you say are the biggest lessons that you have learned at Premiership Rugby as Chief Executive so far, and what are you looking forward to achieving most in the future?
At Premiership Rugby, I think from talking to other CEOs in sporting organisations, you have to, on the big decisions, you have to try and build consensus amongst a whole range of people, probably to a greater degree than you would do in conventional businesses, if I can call them that. In a conventional business, at the top of the organisation, you provide leadership, and the organisation is more naturally pointed in a common direction. In sports, one of the differences is that there are a very large number of stakeholders, whether it's players, clubs, unions, leagues, media companies, there's really multiple amounts of stakeholders. And I think one of the biggest lessons for me, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't get it right, is you've got to steadily build a consensus amongst those individuals. And that's about trying to express a vision, an end point of where we're trying to get to, and build the consensus of how to get there. And it can be quite a painstaking process, and it certainly takes time to do that. All during that time, sport tends to be under the relentless scrutiny of the media, which is natural, but then trying to build consensus around big change things and do it in a way which is successful when you're constantly under the spotlight is a challenge. I think that's the thing I continue to learn. I certainly haven't learned completely yet. Continue to learn, and I think that provides probably the biggest challenge in sport. But at the end of the day, people love it, and sports will continue to grow because it provides an uplifting and engaging attraction and outlet for people. And long may it continue, because we've all been fortunate enough to have some fantastic times out of sports, both playing it and watching it, and that'll be true for forever.
Forever and beyond, if possible. Well, Mark, it has been so incredibly special to have you provide us with your knowledge and your insights into running and growing an organization of such a high caliber, and the importance particularly of building those relationships with investors. Thank you for joining us here at the Rugby Business Network, and we wish you further success at Premiership Rugby.
Thank you very much.